Hey friends and foes, welcome to Brushwork Podcast. My name is Stephanie Scott, and today I have a very special guest on, Patty Holler. During today's interview, we talk about her work, which features really complex natural forest systems. We talk about health, we talk about the land, we talk about nature and how it relates to art, we talk about inspiration and what to do when you feel like you're crashing after a big show. Patty has been an artist here in Seattle for many years, and she's just a delight to have on the show, and I'm really excited. So without further ado, here's the interview. Oh, I'm so excited. I'm so excited to have you here for the podcast. I've been wanting to interview you for 8 months, a while.
Thanks, Stephanie. It's really fun for me.
Welcome to Brushwork. Brushwork is a podcast for emerging artists, and I just think that you've had such a great career with your artwork that it's been, I had to interview you. You're like homegirl Seattle.
Oh yeah, thank you.
For people who don't know your work, can you describe what it is that you make?
Well, I make oil paintings, usually on wood panel,
nice.
Of Pacific Northwest forests.
Mm-hmm.
They're very abstracted, but there's also enough representation that you kind of can locate yourself in the forest. And then I purposefully make you get a little bit lost and then let you find yourself again.
That's good. That's fun. Your work is so colorful, and I love that it's definitely abstracted, but it's not so much that you can't be like, this is botanicals, right? This is like the forest I'm painting. I really love your use of your palette that I see, especially in the last, I would say 2 years. You've had a pretty consistent palette. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, that's purposeful.
Yeah.
When I went to art school, I'd get those lists of supplies and they'd always have the same pigments on it.
Totally.
So I would use those pigments. I'd end up with paintings I thought were a little bit boring, and I've always loved color. Mm-hmm. So I just started buying probably way too many tubes of paint because I'm attracted to all the colors.
Yeah.
And then I went through a period where I was sort of lost, where it was just too much. Mm-hmm. So I went back to a practice I learned in art school at Gage to make color charts.
Yeah.
And I do them in my own way, but that's how I explore color, and that's how I come up with different ideas for new palettes. And I've learned so much about my pigments. And so it's half the fun is kind of planning not only what pigments am I going to combine, but how do I work with transparency, opacity,
right.
Colors that will dull down the other colors or provide more intensity, and how do I make gradients? And that's something I want to talk to you about, because I see you doing exactly the same thing. But it's half the fun, and people do react pretty positively to the color, which makes me happy because I spend so much time working on that.
It's half the painting is just mixing the color.
I think so.
Yeah. I also feel like when you're a student, you have so much, it is the same palette that they give you every single time. It's like, you got your ultramarine and your cadmium red and that one umber color. And then your paintings do start to look all the same. And if it's that's just great advice off the get-go. If you're bored with your paintings, get new pigments.
Yes.
Go pick the juiciest looking color off the rack and use it. And it's a delight.
Yeah. And part of it for me too is I'm not synesthetic. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you know what that is, where people think certain colors bring up certain
memories numbers
in their
taste
head,
sometimes.
Or they might listen to music and see colors. I'm not synesthetic. Mm-hmm. My son is. But I do think in crazy color combinations that aren't found in real life.
Do you? Wait, describe that more. That sounds interesting.
Well, when I'm picturing the forest especially, if I hit that moment before you fall asleep where you're sort of half sleeping, I think part of it has to do with when your eyes close, the things that were light become dark. Mm-hmm. I think part of it is that. So I see values in that half sleep that are a little bit off. And then I'll start seeing these vibrating colors. Yeah. Anyway, so the most boring thing for me to do would probably be to explore every type of green and brown that I see when I wake up.
But I love it.
And the most fun thing for me is, what's an unexpected color I could use here, or an unexpected value relationship?
Yeah.
And that's all I think
Applying
about.
it. Have you always thought about color this way? Like, has this been something recent, or has it been something that's developed?
I think it was mostly around the painting.
Yeah.
When I became an art student, a couple different things happened. One is I'd see all objects as having a coordinates, XYZ coordinates
really?
In space. So I'd go up and down I-5 and like the coordinates would be whizzing through my head.
Yeah.
Because as you're approaching, the coordinates of every tree change. Yeah, you're the one moving, not the tree.
Right.
But the coordinates in my brain were just cascading like a waterfall. It was way too active for me to be the driver for a while.
I'm like, that sounds dangerous to do while driving.
So anyways, I think I'm a little unusual that way. And then the colors, maybe I always had that. I always dreamed in color.
Yeah.
But I think it was becoming a painter where I noticed that, like I have all these, I close my eyes and
it's a skill.
The leaves are fluttering magenta or, things like that.
I love that. That's like whimsical, but also just like, what a great example of an artist's mind.
Well, it was really useful for me because when you paint something so complex, if you want to distinguish between objects, you have to come up with some sort of a system. Like if you were working in black and white, maybe you'd do different cross-hatching and you'd have a key for yourself. And for me, I just use that kind of natural tendency I have to make things the wrong color.
It's fun to replace colors with things that can be unexpected and like a surprise into the painting. And I think that's one of the privileges of the artist, is to make those color choices and being like, no, we get to look at it in this new reality that I'm creating.
Well, I totally see it in your paintings. And I don't know how much you pre-bake the color palette in before you start painting, or whether you're reacting or if it's a combination of both planning and reacting.
It's definitely a plan. I pick my pigments that I want before I even start the painting. And that's like where the real alchemy, I guess, happens, where I'm just like, okay, where do I want one color to transform into another? And where do I want interesting changes to happen when I have one gradient next to another gradient? And like, what is that color relationship doing, and what's coming forward, what's pushing back? And kind of like Joseph Alberzi's, right? I think about layering. Yeah. But it's alla prima. And it's fun.
Yeah, and I love when it's like if you're doing gradients next to gradients, and there's often a spot where they melt.
They melt
together, and then it occupies the same space.
Yeah.
When if you had used maybe more obvious colors or no gradients, you wouldn't have that ambiguous space.
It's true.
I love the ambiguous space.
Ambiguous is great. Like, there's nothing sexier to me than two colors that are like almost identical, but like just a little bit different.
Like, I'm like, a little bit different temperature. Yep, different temperature or different opacity or different undertone.
Subtlety.
Yeah.
But then you have to wield it properly and then place it next to something that's high contrast for you to like really appreciate the difference. Because otherwise, if it's too subtle, you're just like, is this a white painting?
Yeah.
Like, is it just bland? But yeah, that's for the plays. And I think that's why I'm never going to get tired of geometric work, because it's just like constant color combinations. It's fun.
Yeah. And I feel like I learn a lot when I look at geometric abstraction, even though I don't really paint that way. But if you look at my paintings, sometimes you'll see it is like geometric abstraction. I just started with organic shapes.
Yes.
And not hard lines.
They're nearly biomorphic. And I love your forest scenes, and I love the motif of the forest. How long have you been working with the woods, the forest, the earth?
Well, as an artist,
yeah,
I've been working on it since I was an art student. As a person,
yeah,
I have a long history with the woods.
Okay, tell me.
I'm a Seattle kid, so I grew up in northeast Seattle, and we had green belts on both sides of our house, and I'd spend a lot of time in the green belts, just by myself, turning logs over, looking for newts. That was my big thing.
I love that.
I was always looking for newts. And I'd play on the clay bank. And now, of course, I don't think parents would let their little girls go down in the
probably not
green belt.
Yeah, I think that was a moment in time that you were lucky to be in.
It was a moment of freedom. So I just spent a ton of time in the woods, and I loved it. I was a social kid and pretty friendly, but I also had a side to me, which I still have, that I'm fine being by myself.
Yeah.
I'm pretty entertained, actually. and so I'd always invite friends to come down with me, and only every once in a while would any of my neighborhood friends want to go down.
Play in the dirt.
So, and so, yeah, I spent tons of time there. I didn't have any adults in my life who really encouraged that.
Yeah.
I didn't have any teachers to teach me about biology or otherwise encourage this being more than just looking for newts and playing in the clay bank. So I started playing soccer and then just stopped going into the green belt. But then when I was in college, I was pre-med because I wasn't sure what else to do, and I loved science. So I was taking all these science classes and discovered forest resources.
Awesome.
And I thought, this is amazing.
This is it.
Because I loved focusing all the science learning just on the woods.
Yeah.
I could just relate to it. It seemed very concrete to me. And I also loved the people in the forestry department. The students were a lot of fun, really funny, really smart. And a lot of the guys were really cute. So that it was just it was a lot of fun to be a forestry major. Wow. And so then the forest began to be something a little different for me, instead of somewhere where I just went and explored and had fun with all the textures and the animals. I started thinking about measurements because that's what you do as a forester or a forest engineer. It's a lot about measurements and statistical analysis. Yeah. And, memorizing species. It's just all about information, really. And usually the field part of a forestry career is very short, just like 2 or 3 years.
Really?
For a lot of people. And then you go into the office and basically work with information.
Wow.
So I worked as a timber cruiser, which is running around the woods, measuring trees.
That's fun.
filling out these little waterproof cards with all the measurements, and then handing the cards into the office. And then they had their system for developing, like with the computer, the forest inventory. Yeah. And it was about merchantable timber, but it was also about collecting information about the quality of the stands, the age, range, how much is swampy, how much is dry. There's a lot of information to collect. And so, so I just thought of it as a lot of data.
That's cool.
And that's the way I still think about the woods when I paint. Yeah. So
how do you transform from doing that kind of work into painting the work?
Well, in between that and becoming an art student, it was very lonely being a forester. For young foresters, you're often laid off for it's seasonal jobs, and you just do seasonal job after seasonal job, and
hard to maintain.
It was a very frustrating life for me as a young single person. I just didn't want to do it. Yeah. It was a great life for people who'd grown up, I think, in those rural areas and had family that worked either in the timber industry or in different biological aspects of government jobs.
Yeah.
There's lots of that and in families. And so I think for those people, it's no big deal to maybe work on a fire season and then do timber cruising, then be unemployed. But it just wasn't for me.
Yeah.
So I decided to go back and get my MBA. And my thought was, if I get some skills around the numerical part of forestry that I actually did like, that maybe I might be able to work for an insurance company. That sounds crazy when I say it out loud. But
insurance.
but I had come from, it was such a tenuous career and so low paid. The thought of an insurance company hiring me and paying me a really decent salary, and maybe I get to wear pantyhose again.
Amazing.
I thought, this is what I want to do. So I went back and studied accounting and finance and at the University of Washington. And I took the CPA exam just as to get another credential.
That's good.
But, and then I got hired by a big consulting firm, which is now called Accenture. And they told me they would send me to Warehouser because I had this unusual background. But then when I got there, they said, oh yeah, well, we didn't get that Warehouser strategic planning job. So go to Nordstrom. And so they sent me to Nordstrom,
really?
and then I got more into financial systems.
Yeah.
And so and then I went into the cellular industry. So I was totally getting away from the forest.
Yeah.
And I wasn't an art student yet. But what was consistent was I was still working with really complex information and needing to summarize it.
Right.
Like, how do you take something that looks like chaos to the uninitiated, looks like potential to someone like me, and clearly communicate it? Yeah. And that was my job. And now I just do that with paint. So, so I, when I was raising kids, as soon as I had a little bit of extra time, I started taking classes at Gage Academy in Seattle. And eventually, I'm making paintings the same way all the other landscape artists were making them. And then I remember a plein air day where everyone turned their easel to the big view. I forget where we were, like Discovery Park or something. Everyone's looking at Puget Sound. And I turned my easel toward the blackberries and the alders. And my teacher was, what the heck are you doing? And I said, I am so excited to paint this.
You're like the big view's right here.
And I had no idea how to paint it because the lesson is always simplify. Find like the 5 major shapes and get those down first. And I'm thinking, but what's interesting to me is all these layers, and they're complexity. Like, I ran across the term permeable curtains. And I thought, that's exactly what this is. And that's what's interesting to me. And
Can you define that?
Well, I got interested in it because Cézanne worked in these successive vertical, they're like screens. If you look at his paintings, there's, clear foreground, middle ground, background, and kind of interesting areas where you're looking at the background through the foreground. Yeah. And I really like that. And I just wanted my screens to be less dense than his. And it's something I'm still figuring out. Yeah. But that is what I'm trying to do.
That's how you got back to the forest.
Yeah. Or another way to think of it is, when people use Photoshop and they talk about layers.
Yeah. And it's like layers.
It is like it is like layers. So I do think about that. I don't use Photoshop, but I understand the concept.
That's a great concept. I really like hearing your history. I think sometimes artists think, oh, I have to be an artist to be an artist, and you can't be all these other things. But truly, when you're a creative person, everything you do leads up to your art, and everything you do is training towards art, no matter if it looks completely unattached to what you're making. And being trained in systems throughout your quote unquote art days, like that led you right back to your artwork. And that's interesting.
Yeah, I never stopped thinking about art. I always did art as sort of a hobby. I did tons of drawing. When my kids were little, I even would go into the preschool and teach the kids art. I have so many lesson plans for little kids. I know how to keep 3-year-old boys in the art room.
That's adorable.
So I did do that. It just wasn't until art school when I had a little bit of visibility into what the career would look like. And that interested me. I've always been really goal-oriented. And it seems like an art career depends so much on your self-motivation and find a goal to go for and kind of work a plan to achieve that goal. And that is just so much my personality.
Being self-driven is a lot of work, and some personalities aren't meant for it, but I think a lot of artists need to have it. Being like,
I definitely do. I kind of wish I had more of a playful personality, like I could just not really know what I'm going to work on today, go in the studio, pull out some supplies that I bought a long time ago that I never opened. I do wish that I was a little bit more like that. But I've had success kind of leaning into being goal-oriented. And it makes me motivated and happy.
Leaning into your systems.
Yeah, that's true. My own systems.
I feel like I'm a similar way. Some days I come to the studio and I'm like, I don't know what to make today. And then I'm like, yes, I do. I have a notebook full of ideas.
Yes. That's the funny thing. I've never lacked for ideas.
Yeah.
And when people talk about blocks, I can relate for getting blocks for other reasons, but never for not having an idea.
For painting.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's good.
Yeah. I don't know if you ever get blocked, but
very infrequently, but it's because I know that if I'm ever feeling unmotivated, like say I'm exhausted or like I'm thinking about other parts of my life, it's never like I'm gonna wallow in that. It's more like, okay, I know how to get inspired, and if I'm never like feeling frustrated, I just need to get to work, to the artwork. Yeah, and I just like even just mixing color, even if I don't intend to use that color, the color is being used by the fact that it's getting me going. And that's powerful.
Yeah, that's what the color charts do for me too.
How often do you make color charts?
It's more cyclical. Yeah. Like if I do a big show, I'm not usually able to go straight into the studio and make another painting.
Yeah.
I wish sometimes that I could do that. I'm usually working on something that I keep working on, but I often go to the library and look at art history books. I
love it.
or architecture, and then I'll think, oh, there's 5 color charts I could make from, like, Frank Gehry's a big influence on me in terms of color.
Yeah.
Not because he was necessarily using colorful materials. I know he does, but his materials take on colors in the outside world.
Yeah.
Like the titanium as the day goes on, will change color, and so I make color charts off of that. I'll find like books on artifacts from Peruvian excavations.
Interesting.
and then even if I know what pigments they use, like that, I don't know how you pronounce it, that cochineal, the beetle.
Something
pigment
like that.
That's
I also
red.
don't know.
I think, well, I don't have any beetles.
We'll link it in the show notes.
but I do have this kind of pearl red that I got at the art store and never opened. And so I'll make color charts. And that kind of gets me through that period of kind of the exhaustion where I don't have the ambition's the wrong word.
Motivation?
That motivation.
Yeah.
Right.
What do your color charts look like? Like, can you describe what they look like?
They are all grids, and they've got very precise edges.
Ooh.
And the top row is just my collection of pigments. And then all the rest of the rows are just like 1 inch by 1/2 inch rectangles of all the colors I can mix with the top line. So
that's fun.
So that's different from what they teach you in art school, because in art school that every rectangle in your color chart is defined by what is titled in your row and your column.
Yes.
And mine, I think of it more like a dinner party. Like if I had these pigments all come for dinner.
Yes.
Does this look harmonious? Does it look boring? Is there an option for a huge personality in this? Or is it going to overwhelm everybody else? Like, do I put phthalo blue in? Or,
I like it.
Or maybe indanthrone blue is more called for at my dinner party.
That's really excellent. You'll have to send me a picture of that so I can show the people.
Yeah.
I want to see your color charts.
Yep. It works really well for me. So then when I start new paintings, I've got these binders full of color charts.
Yeah.
And I'll flip through and I'll think, what personality do I want this next painting to have? And it doesn't mean I have to use those pigments, but it's a way to save paint, for one thing.
You have all the examples right there.
Yeah.
That's nice.
It keeps things kind of concise and with a direction.
And you know what you can do.
Do I sound like a total CPA?
I just like it. I'm like, this is sexy. I want to make these color charts. I guess I kind of do with my paintings, but they're fun. They're fun. Do you use one color chart per painting, or do you reuse them?
I'm always envisioning the show, since I'm in galleries.
Yes.
And I'm almost always working on a show where I need to make 15 to 20 paintings.
Yeah.
So I try to use several color charts that are harmonious amongst themselves.
Perfect.
So a single painting might be based on a color chart or another color chart.
Yeah.
Or I may kind of mix ideas from the two color charts. But the goal is, I guess, back to the dinner party.
Yeah.
I need that show to be different enough to be interesting and still look cohesive.
Yeah. What do you think makes for a great collection?
Let's see. I haven't ever thought about that before. I think if someone feels inspired by the art that's around them, that it has improved their lives and brought good energy into the household.
Yeah.
Since I'm a mom, I'm very careful about the energy I bring into the paintings, because I'm assuming that a lot of people who collect my paintings are also putting them in their home. I can get all my artistic happiness from my processes, and it's important to me to have a good intention when I make these paintings, because they are going out in the world.
Your paintings always have really interesting titles, I've noticed.
Oh. And
I really liked this one. I wrote a couple of them down because I was like, this is fun. Prism on the Forest Floor is a painting I really like that you've done recently. And Forest Logic. Oh. I like these. How do you come up with your titles?
Well, I listen to a ton of podcasts, and most of them have nothing to do with art. But often the really intelligent people who put words together that I wouldn't necessarily put together. Like Forest Logic was from listening to a lot of philosophy podcasts, and I have never taken a philosophy class, but I understand that the word logic is very important in philosophy. And when you are making an argument that I think they're even called logics. And so I thought, in this painting of the forest where I'm using all these abstract shapes side by side, this is my elegant proof.
I like it.
I think a lot about geometry.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you remember high school geometry and writing down all your assumptions and showing your proof, showing your work. So that's where that one came from. I listen to a lot of health podcasts, and a lot of the ideas from health, I think, relate to a healthy forest and make me think about fungi and, and then there's a whole line of reasoning where I end up with words that go together. So it's really a way to entertain myself.
I like it.
I don't usually have the title until after the painting is like almost finished.
Same. Yeah. It takes me a while. Like sometimes I have like an idea of what I want the emotional core of the painting to be like, but it's not usually until it's like complete where I'm just like, that's it.
Yes.
That's the name. How important do you think titles are to your paintings?
Well, they're really important to me because it's another creative expression. One reason I enjoy being an artist is because I've been able to just analyze every aspect of what I'm doing physically or mentally and having fun with it and being creative. And so that color, I've gone full on into that, the shapes, the imagery, and the titles. I love language, but I would say my verbal skills are less strong than my painting skills.
Yeah.
And so it's a way to stay in language and relate language to my work.
Yeah.
And so it's important to me because it's improving my vocabulary. And again, it's just another creative expression.
I've always thought of titles as a way to help my viewers understand the picture that I painted. If y'all don't know this, I make abstract geometric paintings and they are extremely abstract. And when I tell people that they have emotional centers to them, they're like, really? Sometimes they can feel it, but sometimes they have to be led the way. So usually I use my titles to like get them there, to like help them hold their hand to what I intended. They might feel something totally different, and that's their joy of being someone who looks at art. But titles, I feel like titles are very important.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's when people look at art in a gallery, they approach the painting, look at the painting for maybe 2 or 3 seconds, and then they look at the label right away. And I figure as long as you're doing that, I'm not gonna call it untitled.
Right.
Like I'm gonna give you something, and you're gonna go back to the painting and try to figure out why I gave it that title. And so I would say the title is my entertaining myself, but I do try to relate it to what I was thinking. And so they're sincere in that way.
Yeah, it's good. I would like to go back to, you mentioned briefly nutrition, and I want to hear about that relationship because you said it related to the forest. I was like, that's interesting. Can you tell me more about that?
Yeah, well, I've always been interested in nutrition, even when I was like in middle school. I was the one with the sack lunch with the dates and nuts when everybody else was eating Doritos. I've always been interested in nutrition that way, but I didn't really know that much about how nutrition impacted your body until I raised kids, and one of my kids had some health issues, and we needed to do elimination diets. And
that's rough.
I think anyone who themselves or a loved one has had a difficult to diagnose medical condition where nutrition is always part of trying to heal.
Absolutely.
You learn so much.
Yeah.
And so that gave me an interest. And then I had my own issues the last few years where nutrition's been important. And I find myself, eating things that I wouldn't necessarily pick. Like I'm not normally a kimchi person, but I've learned to eat all fermented everything.
I don't like this, but I'm going to eat it.
I even eat natto. I don't know if you know what that is.
I do know. Yeah. Wow. That's,
so that's been important to me to heal myself.
Yeah.
And has allowed me to not go on certain pharmaceutical drugs that have big side effects.
Yeah.
And I'd have to take for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
I don't have to do that. And I feel like nutrition has saved me.
That's good.
And
That's great news.
Yeah, so I love it. And then in the forest, I've learned so much in painting the forest and reading the science about the forest, about how the forest is actually a community of plants working together. And we remember the big trees, but there are tiny little plants, fungi, virus organisms that help the forest be healthy. And there's a concept of source and sink. A tree can photosynthesize.
Yeah.
We don't photosynthesize.
No.
And so we have to take in, we're used to ingesting.
Yes.
But in a forest, something similar happens. The trees and the plants photosynthesize. Maybe an alder knows how to fix nitrogen and can be a source of nitrogen to the other species that need nitrogen to thrive, but don't, and they can take it up.
Yes.
But they can't fix it or create it in any way. So there's sources of the nutrition and sinks of the nutrition. And over a year's time, that can change, where the sink is now the source for the other species.
That's really cool.
It's really cool, but it makes me question everything I learned in forestry.
Oh gosh.
Because the concept that was really emphasized during my education was, this is a tree farm.
Yeah.
And we planted monocultures. Everything was in rows. We used herbicides to kill off the undesirable species. And I was uncomfortable with it even then.
Yeah.
But I didn't have the scientific knowledge to know exactly why this was a horrible idea. But really you need a mix of species, and you need soil that's being regenerated continuously over time without people messing with it.
Right.
Or getting in between trees and the other trees. So there's a lot of forest practices that interfere with the natural process of working together. And I'm finding in our bodies, we've also got sources and sinks.
Yeah.
Our gut microbiome can be both a source and a sink.
Yeah.
And is so critical for our health. And we've got a different skin microbiome. And how, that's like going level 6. And some of it's new to me, but I'm needing to learn that in order to heal myself.
No wonder you have endless supply of ideas to paint about. You are thinking about this all the time, because I feel like when you're thinking that heavily about a subject, especially the forest, and you were contemplating it, and it comes out through your painting, whether you're intending to paint a forest or not.
Yes.
And it becomes like it's a problem you're thinking about, and you as a single individual can't fix it for all of the forests in the world, but you can fix it in yourself. Yes. And that's a feeling that inspires a lot of art. Yes. And that's really interesting and cool.
Yeah. And I know I've been talking about the science of the forest, and that is important, but I look to all different bodies of knowledge to help me make these paintings. Yeah. I love philosophy. Yeah. I love all aspects of science. And I love language. Yes. And I saw this great quote from Per Kirkby, Danish painter. Yeah. I think he was active from like the 60s to the early aughts. And he made these incredible paintings. He started his career out as a geologist, and there's geology schematics in these beautiful, colorful, abstract paintings that as soon as they're pointed out to you, you see it. And I love it. And I remember reading, he said, I think of myself standing in the center of a sphere with my arms outstretched, and every place I can touch is a different a body of knowledge. Yeah. It's a different thought. And they're all equal. It's radius.
Yeah.
It's all the same measure. Yeah. They're all equally important with no hierarchy.
I love being an artist.
I think that is so
it's cool.
Interesting. Yeah. And so I think about that for my own paintings. Like, how do I keep art history the same radius as in being interested in the forest soil?
Yeah.
I think my paintings will be way more interesting.
It feeds you.
Yeah.
It feeds your art.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
that's really cool.
At keeping myself interested in life, it's a good concept. Anyways.
It's fun to talk to you about inspirations and about what feeds you and what you reach for and what you avoid and what like just collectively feeds your inspiration. Do you ever have trouble talking about your inspiration when you're presenting a painting?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Because like you're talking about it now and I'm like,
I think
you're
you
great.
And it's like we're two unicorns who found each other.
It's true.
Because when I go to a party and start talking about the forest soil and my gut microbiome and how much I love fallen logs decomposing, I just see the people around me disappear. They all seem to need a glass of wine.
That's pretty funny.
Or they need to go to the bathroom, or they just saw someone that they knew. And I realize I have this impact. When I'm in Skagit Valley in Edison, there's a lot of people who like to talk about stumps and alluvial fans and geologic concepts. And but when I'm down in Seattle, really no one can relate. And so I'm very sensitive to social cues and whether I think someone's getting bored. So anyways, when I'm talking about my art, I try to kind of gauge what the person is reacting to. And there's a lot of ways I can describe my art. So it's not a problem for me. I don't feel like now I'm being inauthentic because I can't talk about decomposition. But if someone's into it, I love to talk about decomposition. And I think of my paintings, I always use my hands too, where I've got this upwelling that I think it all starts in the soil. And I do this a lot with all the interactions of the colors. And, so it's this upwelling and a spreading with the community of plants helping one another. Yeah. So if you're into it, I can talk about this and the fluttering in your eyes of these color interactions and the value. But if you're not into it, and I can sense that, even if it's the kind of the cliche, I'm doing a remodel, we're almost to the point of choosing art. I really do like this painting, but it's kind of the wrong size. I'm actually okay. I'm okay. I got my jollies from making the painting. Yeah. And I actually do care that you are, I'm honored that you're interested in maybe looking at my paintings for the end of your remodel. I'm actually a very flexible person that way.
I love that. I find when I was like absolutely a beginner student in arts, I had such a hard time bringing up the fact that I was an artist at a social gathering, a party, what it was at, like, I don't know, someone's like birthday or something like that. And just bringing up the topic that you're an artist and you make things and you want to talk about it can be kind of intimidating. And I think it takes a lot of practice to do.
You know what I think is hard is people want to get right to the money part. They want to know, are you selling your work? Yes. And then that kind of kills the conversation for talking about inspirations and the reason why we do these things. Yeah. And so I've had to internally think about, all the ways we can define success. And to an artist, it's so important to keep making work. And if you layer on this expectation that you're going to make like a really good living off of it,
it's too intense.
It's too much. And I think that's when artists just look to other artists to socialize with. Yeah. But because I had this, career and I was raising kids, I've got hundreds of acquaintances who are not artists. Yes. They're They're realtors, they're lawyers, they're accountants.
They're people.
They're people.
Yeah.
They don't know what else to ask about. So I do, it's kind of, maybe that's where I got my skills to just smile and I'm fine. I truly am fine. If you want to tell me which Benjamin Moore White would look best behind my paintings, I'm totally up for it.
That's so funny. It's true.
And then I just don't talk to them about what value means or color, hues, and intensity and what the difference is.
Yep.
I'm watching my friends disappear.
They're gone.
In my head.
You're like, okay, see you later, I guess. Yeah. I do this thing when I'm at a party and I don't know someone and I'm trying to make their acquaintance. And I have a couple of like artsy questions I ask them. And that I feel like generates a better kind of discussion around art when you're, potentially this person might be a client of yours in the future. And the first thing I love to ask people is, what's feeding your creativity lately?
Oh, that's a good one.
It's a good question, right? And sometimes they're like, oh, I don't really make any art, or they'll just go into a spiel and you're just like, tell me everything about you and your art. And then they will ask you about it later if they're a good conversationalist.
So I have a couple questions about that.
Yeah.
A lot of people are really creative. They just don't define creativity the same way.
Yeah.
So they're not making art, but maybe they're chefs.
Exactly.
Like passionate chefs.
Yeah.
Or they have an organic garden and that's so creative.
It's super creative.
So it seems like you could get skills encouraging people to think of themselves that's really creative. But then also, I'll start talking about art and then people want to tell me about how their aunt was an artist.
It's always the aunt. It's always the aunt. They're like, my aunt makes crafts. And I'm like, okay.
And then they want to show me.
What about you?
They really want to show me her website or her Instagram. And I'm all for it, but it leads me to look at a lot of art that I really hate.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's when my snobbery comes out.
It happens. I hate that as a deflection. When people are like, oh, my relative makes art, let me show you. But I'm like, no, I was trying to get to know you as a person. I was trying to get to know this person in front of me, not your relative. And instead, I think people shy away from creativity and they're like, I don't make art, but this other person that I kind of know makes art. And I'm like, why don't you make anything creative? Why don't you, the person? I feel like every person is inherently creative. Like human beings are creative. And I feel like when you're talking to non-quote unquote artists, they kind of have trouble defining that. And
I wonder if it's that nervousness that makes them think, oh, it's my aunt. That's what I'll talk about.
Right.
Or, do you sell these?
Right.
Because I think that's going to make you happy or something.
Oh, it's a money question.
Talk about the red dots. But artists even do that to each other.
Yeah.
I find.
I feel like artists bring that up when they are thinking about money. They bring it up when they're hurting for sales. They bring it up when they're like, oh, I desperately want to try to sell art. Maybe this other creative person does it in a way that I don't know how and it works better or something. I feel like they talk about that. Or they talk about it because their sense of worth in art is about money. And that's disappointing, but true.
I wonder if some of it's a frenemy thing too.
Oh, really? You think?
That's my cynic coming out.
Maybe. Can we talk about success as an artist?
Yes. I have to think about this a lot.
Yeah.
My art has always sold pretty well. So, and I've always had good luck in galleries. I started selling my work before I got out of art school. And it wasn't because I was this master marketer. I had a couple curators come to me.
Lucky.
Really lucky.
Yeah.
But I understand it's not because my skills are more amazing. I think it's the subject matter that interests me is something that fits a lot of needs for people sourcing art. So right away, I had success in that I was getting my work placed in medical centers, especially. They were early on. And this happened during a recessionary period when I know artists were not selling work. So I was really learning a lot.
That's interesting.
And I started getting requests for commissions from the medical centers.
Yeah.
And that I wasn't quite prepared for.
No.
Because I wasn't that confident yet as an artist. I didn't really know how I just made that painting. I mean, I felt like everything was sort of an accident.
Yeah.
And so when someone has in mind that they want something and then they ask me for it, that really freaked me out. But I said yes because it had it drilled into me. You say yes.
You say yes to things.
Because as an artist, you don't know when the next invitation is going to come.
It's true.
So I got out a little over my skis and had a really anxious few years getting these commissions done. But again, not really feeling like I knew what I was doing.
Right.
And I liked the paintings fine, but I don't think the person asking for them knew what kind of a hell I went through.
Can you make me some art?
Well, I mean,
okay.
The kind of MBA Patty goes, of course.
Of course. Absolutely.
I will. Yeah, but the intuitive Patty was, I have no idea. And anyways, but we were talking about successes.
Yeah.
But, so I had to start defining success a little bit different, even at that period, because I thought, is this really a success that I made a commission, but I gained 10 pounds and broke out in hives? And,
really?
No, I'm exaggerating. But you know what that is like.
Yeah.
That anxiety.
It changes your body.
And I remember I did this for a different reason. It was because I had a show coming up, but I remember my family going to vacation in Hawaii and I didn't go. But that was the kind of commitment I felt that I had to have to making these paintings.
Yeah.
That it really requires way more time than you think it's going to require.
Mm-hmm.
So anyways, I started thinking about success means I have ideas that are interesting to me. I have an exhibit opportunity coming up.
Cool.
It might mean I made a sale.
Yeah.
And that it's still important.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that as my paintings get bigger, I might get 3 in a row and then none for a couple months.
Yep.
And it isn't like the early days when, I don't know what early days. It's
early days of
I
selling.
just had to think about success in different ways.
Yeah.
I think about, like, did a lot of people come to my opening? Did they seem to have a good time?
Mm-hmm.
Did they bring their friends? Did they bring their kids?
Yeah.
I think about all of those things as things I can look for as success. And I try to think less about the things that I can't control.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like exactly when someone is going to buy a painting.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I can't judge my social media because I didn't get enough likes. I think that's a big trap.
Changing your perception on what success means to you as an artist is, I think, a big hurdle that every artist has to go through.
Yeah. And if my thoughts are interesting to me and they're in line with being a healthy person, being securely attached. I learned that.
Securely attached.
Securely attached person, because my relationships are important to me.
Yeah.
I just learned that
Cute.
this week.
That's sweet.
Yeah, as long as this is all working together, then I think that is very successful.
How has your perception of success changed from when you were just beginning in your artistic career?
When I started was when people were just creating artist websites.
Yeah.
And it was before people were really into Instagram. We were using Facebook more. And so there was a lot of talk about branding and this is a successful artist will have a consistent brand and their work is consistent. and their Facebook is consistent, and they've got a big email list. And I think because I'd studied business, I thought, this is hokum. This is really the wrong way. I understand why people still need to think about that to an extent, but I also knew that success is financial. I don't mean that you're making lots of money, but that you understand what is your available inventory. Where is it? How much is its retail value? How much cash do you have into it? If you need to get that cash out of a painting that didn't turn out, maybe you take the frame off. You reuse it. I mean, there's a lot of organizational aspects to being successful that are not branding. I think that artists have that side, just like people in business who go into branding. I think it's a similar personality. And because I'm different and I think about cash flow and all the other things CPAs think of.
It's good to think about.
So I define success probably very differently from someone who's coaching an artist to, find a style, have a consistent style. Here's how you do this on Facebook, and then Instagram is its own thing. But I also know that I have shortcomings with social media. I haven't done enough. Our mutual friend Dree Chapik is amazing in many ways, and one of the ways I love what she's doing is she's making her social media kind of fun and an extension of her personality.
I think
so. I would like to do a lot more of that.
It's nice to do it like that. It's nice to be like, oh, here I am as a person. And here's some fun details, and here's my art, but also here's my life.
And she's awakening that adolescent actor in herself.
Friends, I have a episode where I interviewed Dree, and you can find it on the podcast. I'll put a link to it. I like that idea of being successful as an artist and thinking of it very logically, like you are. But I also like the idea of, what do you think makes a painting successful?
I think a lot about that term Gesamtkunstwerk.
Oh,
have you ever heard of that?
I haven't. What is it?
It's a German term, meaning total work of art, and that the artwork as a whole and is the sum of its parts, and that the sum of the parts could be greater. And I'm going to put it wrong, but that the whole work is greater than the sum of its parts.
I see.
It was used like in the Vienna succession period to also describe people's living situations, that your apartment might be a total work of art. You've got furniture that's handmade and fits with the artistic china, and you've got artwork, and your life in that space is part of the work of art. And you could extend this concept even further to your life is a work of art. And then that's where you kind of lose me. But I do really relate to a cohesive presentation of something complicated. And so I do think of that Gesamtkunstwerk all the time. When I look at the complex forest, like how much of that loving, you might want to call it detail, but they're not really details. They're considered shapes, organic shapes, working together to create cohesive zones within the painting, and that the zones fit together cohesively, and that the entire thing is a clear communication.
Wow.
And your art, I think your art's exactly the same.
I think it does very, very similar things, and it comes together in ways like that. Yeah, that's excellent.
And we used to, in art school, I had a teacher who was a fairly precise person.
Oh, yeah.
And she would talk about the abstract expressionism as emoting on the painting.
Ooh, fancy.
Well, she was saying it derisively.
Yeah.
But it made her her attitude about it made me think a lot about precision in a lot of abstract expressionism. There isn't really a lot of precision. There's a lot of momentum,
movement
and momentum and power. And I love all of that. I really do. But my own personality, that precision and accumulation of complexity and making that complexity even more interesting than what you encounter is really important.
It's good.
Yeah.
It's good. Can we talk about your studio practice?
Sure.
I went to your studio for the first time last year, and I was like delighted by how many paintings you had going on at the same time. You work on 2 or 3 paintings at the same time, is that correct?
Now I'm up to working on about 5.
Holy cats.
And then, so what you saw was my studio in Magnuson Park.
Yeah.
It's a repurposed Navy building.
It's really cool.
And I have 425 square feet.
Perfect.
With 2 gigantic windows.
Yeah.
And it's a beautiful space with high ceilings. And it used to be the administrative office where the Navy people would answer questions about people's paychecks.
Oh.
Which I think is so perfect for me.
You're like, the energy of this space is right.
Yeah, so perfect for me. When I first got the space, I had a feeling there might be a ghost.
I'm sure there were several ghosts in a building like that.
Well, the building had been abandoned for, I think, like 40 years or something.
It's a long time.
A really long time. And I was just noticing weird things in the space. So I set up a trap that I saw on like one of those cable channels where the paranormal investigators, they had a trick where they put a slip of paper in the door so that if anybody had opened the door in the night, it would fall out and you'd find it on the floor. And I arranged the pillows on my sofa a certain way so that if any poltergeist was going through. Anyways, I don't necessarily believe in ghosts, but I just went with it.
Okay.
And I did my paranormal investigation. I actually think it might have been a security guard was going into my studio.
So the door did open.
The door did open.
Wow.
And the pillows were moved, but I have a feeling it was Ray. He was a nice guy. But so probably shouldn't have been in anybody's studio. But yes, so that's my studio in Seattle. And then what I don't know, if you know, I have a place up in Skagit Valley.
Beautiful.
That's a house with 2 outbuildings. And I make art in the house, like drawing.
Nice.
Kind of quiet things. And then in the 2 outbuildings, I make paintings as well. So I've got 4 paintings or so going on in Magnuson. And when those are too wet to work on, I run up to Skagit Valley and work on another 2 to 4 paintings up there. And I need to have that many going on at once. Yeah. Because over the last few years, I've had successive solo shows. And my paintings just take so long to make.
You gotta.
I have to keep at it.
Have to keep the machine rolling. Yeah. That's amazing. Okay, so can you describe a typical studio day for you? Like you wake up, you brush your teeth, you get dressed, and then what happens?
In Seattle, I will get coffee. And then I also have a daily matcha tea habit.
Ooh, nice. I love matcha.
And I do that for health, and it makes me feel great. Yeah. And I usually, I'll go to the art store or whatever I need to do or exercise to kind of get that energy out so that when I'm coming to the studio, my body is ready to focus. And I always have notes that I have taken from the previous studio day about what I need to be accomplishing. And then that way I remember to do those tiny little things.
Very
like
forward.
If I made a ding on the side of a finished painting, I'll go fix that. Yeah. So I've got a list and I'll start with those easy things first and then go into the big work. Yeah. And there's always points in the painting that are easy for me to just get right in and into the flow. There's other points that are difficult. So if I've got difficult, I try to do those around, like 11 o'clock in the morning until about 2, and then save gessoing and color charting and that kind of thing for later in the day. And I usually work about 5 or 6 hours in the studio. If I'm getting close to a show, it's more like 8, and I might work evenings.
I understand.
But, but I try to keep most of my year in that 5 to 6 hours.
That's
and then
good.
I do the same thing up at Samish Island, but it's a different setting. It's a beautiful natural setting, and there's eagles and deer.
Glorious.
And I have an organic garden.
Wow.
And so my routine to get my energy out is I'm outside. I climb up and down beach stairs. I take walks. I look at eagles.
Yeah.
Running to Edison and say hi to friends. So I am capable of great focus, but I also am distractible. So I'm just acknowledging that I'm distractible.
Yeah.
And I try to build in to my studio day a few ways to get distracted without losing too much time.
That's fantastic. Knowing yourself that well is really powerful. When it's not a time leading up to a show, do you have like a hard cutoff time where you're just like, we don't work past 7 o'clock or whatever?
Well, when my kids were in school,
Yes.
I had no choice but to be available to pick them up from school or drive them to soccer practice. So those were days of hard deadlines. Although I did used to bring work that I could do in my minivan. So while I waited for soccer practice to end, I could still get things done, like write artist statements and that kind of thing. Now that my kids are grown, I don't have a reason that I have to stop at 5 or 6 or 6:30. I usually just keep going for when I feel like, okay, I'm in the flow. If I stop now, it's going to be difficult to get back in.
Yes.
So I will work to the point of great discomfort sometimes for that.
Yeah.
Like I might have a headache. I might be starving.
Yeah.
But it's like, I'm not going to stop.
You can't. You got to like ride the wave until it's over.
Yeah. So I don't have like specific hours anymore.
And what is your favorite way to rest?
I would say be outside.
Yeah.
Up at Samish, I have, probably over an acre of natural woods, and there's, trees that are probably like 80 or 90 years old.
Amazing.
There. So I hang out in the woods.
Hang out with your friends.
I've got some friends up at Skagit I can take walks with.
Yeah.
There's a lot of creative people up there. So I do that. And then in Seattle, I tend to watch a lot of YouTube videos.
Perfect. Me too. It's great.
I end up with hobbies I didn't know I would have. I went on a kick with gardening about growing potatoes in containers.
Oh, yeah?
I don't even eat potatoes.
I don't even eat potatoes.
But I can tell you all about growing them in a container. And then the best part of the video is when they dig their hands in the soil or dump the container out and all these beautiful potatoes come out. And so YouTube is a joy.
That's perfect. Can we talk about preparing for a show? You said you just have like consecutive solo shows happening. What are some of the preparations that you have to do for a show that happen the same year over year?
Well, I've got this down now to its own system. The first thing I do is thinking about what do I want this show to look like and feel like? What do I want the viewer to feel when they walk in this show? And sometimes I do have a title in mind for that. And usually it's a play on plants.
Fun.
Plants or organic eating. Like I've had plant-based as the title for one of my shows.
I love it.
Growth patterns. Painted Forest was my most recent one. So I take a lot of notes. That's also when I intentionally choose some inspirations. Like right now, I do really like Kirkby, however you pronounce his name. So I'm reading a lot about him. And I've got notebooks and journals.
Nice.
And that's also when I go to my color charts and see if I'd like to create some new ones so that I have a source. I think of it, in a systems flow chart where you have inputs, process, outputs. The beginning of the thinking about the show is when I work on the quality of all my inputs.
Okay, yeah.
And then I look around at what panel sizes I already own and order up the ones that I don't own, and more I'm coming up with kind of custom sizes. So I need to, so I start working on the materials, and then I do a lot of drawing, just to play with imagery, and I do have photo resources, but I combine them.
Nice.
And I do it all in my head, kind of. So I've got the drawings done, and then I start with the gessoing and the underpainting.
The prep.
So basically this takes a few months, and I don't have any finished paintings yet.
Yeah.
But I try to bring several along at the same time rather than work on one painting from beginning to end and then doing that 20 times. Yeah. Because when I've tried to do that before, I end up...
You run out of time, right?
You run out of time.
Yeah.
So it works way better for me to work a little bit in batches, like this batch of 5, just bring them along, start the next batch of 5, so that by the time I'm like a month or 2 from needing to deliver the paintings, I'm able to bring them to the framer and to the photographer. So it's really a project management issue. Yeah. And I even learned some project management tools in my MBA program that
They're handy.
Still use. I use a lot of Excel. I make little Gantt charts for myself where I'm working backwards from deadlines. And, if I turn in the paintings on this day, 6 weeks prior to that, this is what I need to be doing.
Totally.
And you need to be doing that hard.
Yeah.
It isn't, I've got 6 weeks left.
No. It's like if you're behind at 6 weeks till, then you're like late for the show.
Yeah. So that's getting ready for the show for me is a lot about a project management exercise. Yeah. But I take that seriously so that I have as much time as possible to think about the intellectual side of the show.
That's good. That's great.
If I don't think about project management, there is no time to think about the intellectual side. There's only time to think about execution and errands. And I don't like that stage. I mean, it's part of it where you're executing. Yeah. That was cool what you painted in that upper left-hand corner. Now you need to do it over the surface area of a 72-inch wide painting. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot of work. Preparing for a show takes so much planning, and I think when artists are doing like their very first one, it's so overwhelming. And
Well, that's how I got my first break, was an artist just wasn't organized.
Really?
There was a 3-person show that was going to happen, and one of the artists just admitted she couldn't do it. And someone had given me the advice that make your show now, even if you don't have an exhibit lined up. Make your show now, because you never know when you can just slide on in.
It's such great advice.
And that's exactly what happened. I got to slide on in and be part of a 3-person show.
Fortune favors the prepared.
Yeah. So anyways, that was such good advice someone gave me.
Yeah. I try to always have enough art that I could throw up a show just like right now. And in my inventory, I don't want to have so much excess that it's you're not making sales, but enough where if someone called me, hey, I need someone to hang a show tomorrow, I could. Yeah. And I feel like that feels like a measure of success to me some days.
And then are you good at saving some paintings for yourself?
Dree actually gave me this advice. She told me, she's like, you should be keeping one painting per collection that you do. And just your favorite or whatever one calls to you, you should keep at least one. And so I stick them in my house. We're in my studio right now. Hey, everyone. But my collection lives in my house.
Oh, great.
And like that one.
Yeah,
so
I love that one.
It's from there. Yeah. That's from 6 years ago. And I'm never selling it. Feels good.
Did that painting represent a point in time where you had clarity about what you were trying to do?
I think that painting is like the pinnacle of that type of painting that I wanted. And I was like, oh, that's where I really nailed the idea. And the ones that came before were leading up to them. Ones came after. I'm not going to say that they're like copies of it, but they feel like, okay, we got our pace down. And now I have the style and I can pull from it if I want to make another painting like it. Mm-hmm. I call this one Broken Symmetry. And it's a perfectly symmetrical drawing, but broken by color.
Yeah, I love it. And I love like what we were talking about with the value relationships and the gradients.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
It's pretty fun.
And have you ever noticed that the paintings that are important to you that you're tempted to save maybe aren't even attractive to collectors?
Sometimes.
I have one that would just languished in the gallery, and I wanted it back. It's my favorite painting.
Yeah. Did you get it back?
I did.
Nice.
And I'm keeping it.
You're like, it's never for sale ever again. Snoozed, you losed. It's mine now. So your show happens. You've done all the preparation. You have your opening. You sell some work, or you don't. Whatever happens. What happens after a show? You've taken down the art. It's back in your studio, in your home, wherever. What happens to your creativity then?
Well, before I realized this is what happened, I used to crash and burn. I mean, not to the point of being institutionalized, but crash.
Yeah.
I would be kind of overly sensitive. I'd think I have no friends, because it's such a social time, the show. And then they take down your work, put somebody else's work up. Nobody from the gallery is calling you.
Yep.
And then everybody just saw you at your opening, so they're not like calling and saying, let's get together, walk around Green Lake. Mm-hmm. So I used to just crash. And then I started hearing other artists say, oh, yeah, that's what happens. And so I work a lot on little rituals I can do to be a human again.
What's one of them?
Well, the matcha tea is a good one.
Yep.
If I have my daily matcha, there's one coffee place near me that makes a really excellent unsweetened one.
Yum.
It's a reason to be alone together if I just want to go and sit and be surrounded by people.
So good.
Doing normal things like doing the job they were doing last week.
Nice.
Or, get together with my daughter or other friends. They take a lot of walks. There's usually a long list of administrative or personal business that I haven't taken care of because I pushed it to the side for months. I try to approach that with the attitude that I'm going to feel so great when these things are done, rather than, oh my God, like I ignored this.
Yeah.
And now it's actually a problem.
Yeah. Yeah.
So then that becomes another source of stress. That's what used to happen to me. But I used to do acupuncture as sort of a restful thing. I still like doing that.
I love acupuncture. It's great.
Yeah. I like all those things. And so I try to take care of myself, just focus on self-care and not tell myself that it's greedy. There's room for a couple hours a day of self-care if I'm not painting for 6 hours. I actually like a lot of personal business stuff. Like I love finance. I love
it's fun to learn
checking out the retirement account.
Yeah. Watching numbers go up.
or
down.
I help family members with their finances. I have view access to like go and bug people. Like, why the heck did you buy that stock? I know they're going to cut me off now.
That's so funny.
Yes.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, I do all those things. And so this time, I was telling Dree, I feel like after this last show, has been the most successful that I've been in avoiding the crash.
Nice.
I started going to other people's openings right away so that I stayed in that artist social life
connection
that I enjoyed so much during the month of my show. I was able to support other people by going to their events. I went out of my way to make a few walking dates.
Nice. Yeah. That self-care is good.
Yep. I went to the library several times.
I love the library.
UW Art Library.
It's beautiful.
Made color charts, read art history.
And then you start the show cycle over again, right?
Yeah, I mean, there comes a point where you realize, wow, I'm already behind. Like you took your break.
Yeah.
And got your rest. And usually before I feel that I've had enough rest, I look at the calendar and realize, so I've been working on a commission that I got after the show.
Nice.
And that's been fun. I like working on it because I don't freak out over commissions anymore. But now I've been invited to a group show in October.
Ooh.
I need to work on that. And if the gallery wants something different for Seattle Art Fair from what I've already made, then I'm behind. I'm behind. But I'm willing to do that.
Nice.
Yeah.
So next you have the Seattle Art Fair. You've got a group show. When's your next solo show?
I don't have one lined up, and that's partly on purpose.
Yeah.
Because I feel like that intellectual quality of my inputs is so important to me. I want to paint as good as Pericure could be.
Yes.
I won't get there if I don't reserve time and devote myself into thinking.
That's true.
And if I sign up for another solo right away, I've lost that opportunity because that deep thinking only happens for me if I'm not nervous about a schedule.
Protecting your creative learning, protecting that development is really important. And I feel like in the pursuit of trying to make a career, a lot of people lose that. And it's like giving yourself the space and like recognizing that you need the space to get there, to learn, to develop, and to think. That's important. So that's cool.
And I notice you do residencies.
Sometimes,
and I suppose that's a natural way to force yourself into that
it can
focus.
be.
Or maybe if I went on a residency, I'm sure I would just knock on people's doors and talk.
I think that's part of it. A residency can be an excellent space to just get rid of all of your responsibilities and just focus on the creative work. But if it's a big one and there's lots of people, you're also there to make connections. And that's a different kind of work. So both can happen. And that happened to me in my last one, but it doesn't happen every time.
Yeah. I've only done them a couple times because of my family.
Yeah.
I haven't been able to. I do what's called MADR.
What's that?
Make your own damn residency.
Make your own damn residency, folks.
So I make my own damn residency up at Samish Island.
Perfect. I feel like you could do that. You could just like rent a house for a month or something, or like you could find a place that is outside of your normal. But if you're by yourself, you still have the responsibility of cooking and cleaning and taking care of your physical form. And it can be hard to self-motivate yourself if you're truly by yourself.
Yeah, I have a friend who does these isolated cabins in wilderness areas, residencies.
Yeah.
Like the last one she did, she had a wolf and a moose in her front yard.
Oh my gosh.
And I'm not sure that that's where I would get my best thinking done. But she loves them.
It works for her.
I think I might be tempted to do one in an urban area where there's a good museum.
There's a lot of art residencies out there, and I'm trying to book more of them because I had such a great time at the last one I did. And I think they're unusual, and they put you in new places, and they change the way you think about your work, especially if there's other artists to talk to, other artists who are in the same sort of field as you, like not just visual artists, but like painters who do what you do. Yeah, it's fun. That's cool. You should do another one. You should
yeah,
do more.
I'd like to. My life's very complicated with family. Yeah. I mean, my kids are grown, but I'm still involved. And then my mom's elderly.
Yep.
And I am the contact.
Life is complicated.
Every few days there's something.
Yes.
The gas company has to come out.
Yep.
Problems she can't solve.
Mm-hmm. I get it. Life happens. And your demands are pulled places. And making time to do the residency can be tricky.
Yes.
Yeah. What's some advice you would give a younger artist from things you've learned?
I think the most important thing is to make art.
Yeah.
Not learn to be an artist.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember my gallerist saying this to me too, that when he looks at artists who are asking him to represent them,
mm-hmm.
He'll ask himself, how much time does this person seem to be spending being an artist versus making art?
Ooh.
And I didn't know exactly what he meant at the time, but now I get it, because there's a lot of kind of flurry of activity around, living the artist life. And I know I said I went to the openings, and I think that's important. But if someone seems to go be at all the openings, like, do you spend time making art? And maybe they're lucky, maybe they have a process that's so quick that they're able to make art.
Yeah.
Mine is just slow.
Yeah.
So it takes a real commitment in the studio.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where my focus is. So I think for a beginning artist, maybe start with claim a table like in the house.
Yeah.
With storage underneath.
Mm-hmm.
And leave your stuff out. Don't put it away.
Don't put it away.
And that is your spot. That's not the kid's spot. I think of all the times my kids would make a Lego structure. You are not allowed to break this Lego structure down. And so that Lego structure would sit for months,
Ages.
if not years.
Yeah.
And so why is the Lego structure more important than mom or dad having that table?
Yeah.
And I think so I would say kind of insist on your own physical space, and that's more than I did for myself.
Yeah.
Also, I was always waiting for this perfect space, and like when you watch HGTV and we're going to make mom a perfect space.
Dangerous.
And then they end up with these super specific storage solutions and all the crafts. Usually beginning artists also have crafts going on. So there's a lot of stuff.
Yes.
and I think waiting for that, yoga meditation room with your Martha Stewart art supplies in the back, like, this is really a waste of time.
Yeah.
Like, if you had nothing more than paper and a pencil, just devote a few minutes at least a day. Do something. And if you don't make art, make meals or, do something creative, but just commit. I didn't do that. I was really kind of waiting for permission, maybe.
Yeah.
And that was a mistake. I think back to when I was a kid, when I was able to. Well, actually, my mom always put all my markers away, but I did spend hours with my markers.
Yeah.
And making really cool designs, op art stuff. And I didn't feel bad for spending that much time. That was what we did.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Make time for your art.
Yeah.
And do it.
Yeah.
Don't wait for the perfect moment.
Yeah. And don't spend all that free time going to other people's shows. I know I just told you that I go to other people's shows, but commit to yourself. Just make more art.
Make more art.
Even if like all you have is 3 colors and paper.
That's enough. That's enough to do.
Oh, and then the other thing, I guess, is make that show that you don't have yet. The advice that someone gave me.
Yes.
Make that show.
Make the art show now.
And if it has to be little minis, because that's the physical space you have, you can only do watercolors, you can only do minis. Make a show of watercolor minis.
Totally. I think it's interesting when people are like, oh, I only have this one little supply, and usually it's watercolors or markers. And I'm like, well, then make art show off with the watercolors and the markers. If you only have it, like, get really good at it.
Yes.
Have some audacity.
Yeah, I went to the Paul Klee Museum in, I think it was Bern, Switzerland. And he was so prolific.
Yeah.
And he had a full-time job, but he made art every day. And a lot of it was just small pieces on paper. And you could make the argument that a lot of it did not belong in a museum, even though it was Paul Klee. But I mean, that was someone who clearly left his art supplies out.
So good.
And just made stuff.
Just make things.
Yeah.
I love it. Patty, thank you for being on Brushwork today.
Oh, thank you. That was really fun.
That was really great. Where can people find you online?
I'm usually pretty active on Instagram at Patty Haller.
Perfect.
I've got a website, pattyhaller.com.
Nice.
And then my finished paintings are always on my gallery website. So WoodsideBrassethGallery.com.
Okay.
And also Smith and Valley Gallery.com has an inventory of some older paintings.
Perfect. Well, I will put all the links to all of that in the show notes today. And thank you so much.
Thank you. That was so fun, Stephanie.
It was good. We did it.